Tomorrow is the test on chapter 6.1 through 6.5.
What?
The inequality stuff. So, the first one is you just need to graph. They're already solved for you. X is greater than 5. You don't need to make a big long number line. You can just put 3 numbers on there. You need to make sure you put a hollow or filled in circle. Is this hollow or filled in?
No.
Hollow.
Hollow, because it's not equal to. Remember, if it has the equal, you fill it in. That means it includes it. So x is greater than 5 is everything to the right of 5. X is less than or equal to negative 2. Remember, with your negative numbers, you got to put those backwards. So that would be a filled in circle. And x is less than, so that's everything to the left. These are not solved. Here they're solved because the letter's by itself. Here you got to get the letter by itself before you graph it.
Add 3.
So all you got to do here, is add 3.
That'll be 14. X.
So x
Greater than 14.
is greater than 14. And then you have to graph it. Hollow at 14. Because it's not equal to. X is greater, so everything to the right. This is a 2-step. We've got to subtract 3 first. Then you got to divide by negative 2. So if you haven't memorized it yet, you have to memorize it.
Divide by negative to negative.
What happens?
If you divide by negative to negative.
Well, you switch the sign.
Yep, if you divide by negative, you got to switch the direction of the sign. So it'd be x is greater than or equal to negative 4. So that would be a filled in circle at negative 4. X is greater, so everything to the right. Here, it doesn't matter what side, the x is on the right, so you just get it by itself. I got to subtract 4. Then divide by negative. So again, since you're dividing by negative, you got to switch the direction of the sign. So that would be negative 3 is greater than x. So when you graph this, it's a hollow circle because it doesn't have the equal. Which way does the arrow go?
To the left.
Right. Read the letter first. X is less than. The point is on the x. So that means it's less than. Less than is everything to the left.
That's easy.
Yep, that's easy. So some of the word problems with these. Okay. Say you're running a 5K.
Oh, no thanks.
I ran one of them, but I didn't even stop.
Good job.
Did you pass out after?
I got 58.
The one for the nursing home? Yes, you did.
I did not stop.
About what? You didn't even run
You got
that
butt sweat?
much.
Not really. I don't know.
Yeah, you gotta let Carly try and keep up with you.
He is long.
I bet you wish you got apple juice.
I just.
I didn't even
Okay.
break a sweat.
That's how it was.
So if you finish in 38 minutes, you got to write an inequality that represents all the runners'
Second grade?
times. I forgot to write in. All the runners' times that finished after you. So you can use any letter, X, Y. Since it's talking about time, I'll use a T. So what would be the inequality that represents the times of the runners that finished after you?
38 minutes.
Okay, T is compared to 38. Now you just got to get the right sign in there.
Minus. Plus.
T is less than 38? Or equal to? Now if it's equal to, that means they tied you.
So it would just be less than.
They want the ones that finished after you.
Oh.
Now, that means the times are less than 38, which could be 37, 36. Does that mean they finished after you?
No, that would be more.
It's got to be, T has to be greater than, their times has to be more than your time. Okay?
Switch the side.
But he did.
What's happening?
Nothing. We're done. That's
Oh,
the
you switched the
answer.
side?
Case. He didn't go up, case he wants to.
What?
Did you get my?
I'm surprised he didn't get a technical for going like this when he just threw it out of bounds.
It was like the whole cast of Family Guy.
Oh, yeah, I know.
What? Don't send Adeline things without my permission. I just say.
Send it to her. Yeah, there, because it's on the motion.
That's who took my spot.
That's who took my spot. I
That's
should have
it.
sent that to Adeline.
Okay, you
Your
gotta
whole
become my
family.
number one because I'm done with
I
that one
said
now.
scrap it.
I'm my third still.
Oh, wait. Mine.
Where am I on yours? You're my. Oh wait, you're my
All those
third. I
Family Guy.
think you're mine too.
I'm not even on. I'm
I
not
think
even on.
someone
it.
actually went above you.
Where did you go?
Oh my god, we are done. I'm losing the street.
With your brother?
Carly,
and
I'm
mom?
just kidding. I
I
don't
love-
know for sure.
What, you went to your house, or?
What?
Yes, I'm losing the street.
They answered me
Okay.
first.
Shh, quiet.
This is easy.
Okay? Solving compound
Oh, I was gonna say, what the heck?
inequalities. Same thing, except you're going to have two answers. If it's all written as 1, you just need to get the x by itself. So first you do the add or subtract. It's a plus, so you minus 3. And you'd have 7 is less than 2x is less than or equal to 10. Then divide by 2. And you'd have 7 halves. You could leave it 7 halves, or you could write it as 3.5. Is less than x is less than or equal to 5. So when you graph this, when you put your numbers on here, make sure you put them in the correct order. Sometimes they're reversed up here. This one has a hollow sign. This one has a filled-in sign. And when you draw your lines, remember they're either going to go away or towards each other. This reads x is less than 5, so that's to the left. This reads x is greater than 3.5, so that goes to the right. Now, I just want to point out, some of you, when I corrected these, I don't know if it was an accident or what, but some of you had like that. Remember, that's a point off because the lines don't keep going this way. It's just everything in between. Okay, so don't extend the line one way or the other. When they're ors, they write them separately, so all you got to do is solve each one. Subtract 3, and you get x is less than -2, or we got to add 3, x is greater than 5. So when you graph that, I got -2 and 5. This is hollow. X is less than -2, so it's to the left. This one's hollow.
To the right.
X is greater than 5, so it's to the right. So that brings us to the absolute values.
What do you mean?
I got 4 kids.
My cousin has that too.
So does my cousin.
Is it a
I
girl?
haven't answered anyone this morning. No, he didn't. What? I did.
No. Oh, these are easy.
Because she was mad at me because I came up with the
Can I do the first
You
one?
can't get here early and you can't answer me. I woke up at 7:30 and I had to rush.
You said you took 45 minutes to straighten your hair.
Yeah, that's why I didn't get here until 8:15. Because we didn't leave my house until 8:04.
Okay,
Hey, don't let
for
Carly do that.
absolute values.
There's 2 answers.
Yes, you need to remember absolute value, equations, or inequalities have 2 answers. So this is a simple one. X equals 3. The 2 answers are 3 and
-3.
-3. When they're like this, you got to make sure the absolute value is by itself. You rewrite it, set it equal to whatever it's equal to, you put the same exact sign on the other side, and then you put the opposite on the other side. That's how you can find the two answers. Now you get the x by itself, so I got it, since it's a plus 5, I got a minus 5, minus 5, minus 5. So it's negative 12 equals x equals 2. If it's like this,
Give it a 3.
you got to get rid of this before you write it out like this. Since it's a plus 3, you got a minus 3. And I have 2x minus 5 equals 21. Now that it's just the absolute value, you put the same sign over here. You put the opposite over here. And you get the x by itself. So I have to get rid of the minus 5 by adding 5 to all the sides. So that is negative 16 equals 2x equals 26. Then divide by 2. And you get negative 8 equals x equals 13. Okay? Now, if these were all inequalities,
Chewy.
I don't think it's.
Okay. If they're inequalities, you solve them exactly the same way. The only one that's really a little bit different is this one, because it's no longer equal. So you do the same rule. Once the absolute value is by itself, you rewrite it, put the same sign on the other side, and put the opposite on the other side. So there's the solution for this inequality. X is in between negative 3 and 3. This one, you'd put the same sign, then you'd move it over to this side, and then you just solve it. Instead of an equal, it's a greater than or equal to. Same thing here. If this was less than, you'd first have to move the negative 3 out of there. Then once it's written, you put the same sign on each side. Solve it. And once you have the x by itself in the middle, that's the solution. Now you do got to remember when you're solving these, if this is a negative, if you divide by negative, you got to remember you got to switch the directions of both the signs. So that brings us to the stuff we just did, the graphing, the inequalities.
Yeah. What kind of face is that called?
Okay, now, here's what happens. Sometimes people get this confused because it just says to graph the inequality.
And you start at 0.
Now, some people get this confused with the first part where they just put a number line, filled in and going to the left. The difference on these is you will be given a graph. So that should be a cue that it's not going to be a number line. So when you graph these, x is less than or equal to 2, crosses the x-axis at 2. And it is a solid line. Less than is everything to the left. Elena and Lydia, you already handed this one in. That assignment from Thursday, they're all like this. They're all either up and down or side to side. And then yesterday's was, or Friday's was these, where you get the line. If it's y, if it's y is less than 2, that crosses the y-axis. At 2, and this is where you need to put a dotted or solid line. Since it doesn't have the equal, here's 2 on the y-axis, you'd put a dotted line. And then you got a shade. Since since y is less than, it's everything below the line. So those are the straight ones. Then we've got the ones like we just corrected. Okay, if we're going to graph that, you got to get the y by itself. So you move this over, and you're left with negative y is greater than negative 3x plus 5. Remember, if the y is negative, you just change all the signs, including the direction. So that changes, this changes directions, that changes, and that changes. So when you graph it, it crosses at negative 5. So down 5. It's got a slope of 3, so you make it a fraction, so you can do rise over run. Up 3 over 1. Then you got to remember, solid or dotted?
Dotted.
Dotted, because it doesn't have the equal. And then again, you got to remember to shade. Sometimes people forget to shade. This says y is less than. So you go to where it crosses the y-axis, less than is below, which means you shade everything on that side of the line. So there's none that's really tricky. They're just like the ones I just did. So it shouldn't be too hard.